everybody out there in Chester.
If they only knew what goes on before that camera
they
comes
knew
out.
the chaos before we get to these microphones and the
We're here,
cameras
though.
get on us, which
here.
I assume they are. And we've got a great show tonight, folks, and it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful early spring day. Couldn't ask for any better than today, and it's making me feel good. And my good friend Mike Farley is here. Thank goodness. We love him to be here. And he says he's got he says he's got a lib spleen for tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna. We're gonna be talking about a very serious topic, and I don't want to take too much time away from that. But there was some breaking news as I was heading out, and I thought it's very important. I thought if ever there was a time that I had to do a lib spleen, now's the time. First for the breaking news. Earlier today, the president tweeted out that the Department of Justice was going to have a press conference, whereupon later the Department of Justice issued a statement that, in fact, yes, they would have a press conference. Chicken egg, maybe, I don't know. There will be a press conference by the Department of Justice tomorrow, which is the day we expected the Mueller report to be dropped or turned over to Congress, redacted as it would be. So there will be a press conference by the Department of Justice, Attorney General Barr and Assistant Attorney General Rosenstein will be at that press conference. Then the DOJ later notified Congress that they would receive the Mueller report at 11:30, a full 2 hours after the press conference. Boy, I wonder why they're doing it like that.
We get the spin first.
Right. We get 2 hours of news time before the spin. The president also, in his tweet, announced that he may do a press conference after the DOJ conference. We'll get a double spin before the Mueller report the redacted Mueller report is actually released. Late today, the spokesperson for the Mueller team made a point of issuing a statement that neither Mueller nor any member of his team would attend that press conference. Think about what's going to happen, and think about why they said that. They didn't have to issue that statement, but they made a point, and I think it's a way of throwing some shade at that press conference, at least expression of disapproval. So what I want to, the lib spleen part of this is, don't make up your mind until you see the report, okay? Everything that happens before the report comes out is pure political spin. And just to make it clear, pure political spin, okay? And I just want to end very quickly on something, I'm going to turn 60 this year. I remember,
youngster.
I guess maybe, Bob, but to me it doesn't necessarily feel that way. But I am old enough to remember a time when political cover-up was a bad thing. And I just want to point out, when you cover up words with black ink, that's a cover-up. So this is where we're going right now, folks. And I remember 1973, the cover-up was worse than the crime, and I expect that we might be heading in that direction.
Expletive deleted everywhere.
Yeah. So that's my lib spleen today. Listen, don't listen. Don't even turn your TV on until about noontime, because it's going to be wild until then. But there will be enough sound bites. Oh, and by the way, that Trump press conference will probably be blasted on Fox, so that the Fox viewers will only see that when the report is released, so they're not even going to get to see
you're so
the release
cynical,
of the
Mike.
report.
You're so cynical.
Oh, and by the way, it all happens on the afternoon of Holy Thursday, going into Good Friday and Easter weekend, where people's attention presumably will be toward their families. Congress is out of session. The excellent PR attack on this. Excellent PR attack, we must say. But I've taken too much time, Bob. Let's get into the meat and potatoes here. We got a great show to talk about.
I don't think you knew you were in for all this when you came here tonight,
this has
Bill.
been good.
Lib spleen is an interesting concept that Mike's come up with. But we are very happy to have here today Bill Ryder, who's never been on our program before. Regrettably, but we are going to make that up right now, because he is the director of the, I got to get this right, Mental Health Center of Greater Manchester. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah. And this is an organization that's providing benefits to some of our most distressed citizens. And I don't think they necessarily have to be from Manchester, do they? I mean,
it's the Manchester and the immediate surrounding towns.
Manchester and surrounding towns. And, we are having our problems with mental health crisis here. Some are related to the opioid problem, but not all. And we have gradually become to understand that mental health is just as important as physical health. As you go forward in your golden years, hey, that's me, you want to have your physical health, you want to be able to take your walks, I really enjoy that, but you want to be able to have your mind active and at work. And these are the people that are helping us attain that goals.
Can I interject a little bit, Bob? Because I'd like to expand the scope a little bit. It's not only the golden years. Everybody wants to have solid mental health. And
you're right.
To the extent that there is a crisis now, we made it. The problem has been with us my whole life. And I've watched a variety of ways the state of New Hampshire has attempted to deal with it, none of them very successfully, which is how we end up where we are. So I do understand that, the opioid crisis, addiction disease is a part of the mental health issue, but it's far broader than that, and it's been with us a long time. And the crisis comes when we don't handle it correctly.
Yeah.
The existence of the problem is not the crisis.
And we've had some heroes on this. I think you'd probably agree with Bill. John Broderick, my former partner at the practice of law, former Chief Justice. I mean, he's been a hero in advancing this cause.
I can't go hero, but
we can. Yeah, okay. But in any event, I think
we've had this discussion before, Bob. We'll leave this for.
But in any event, let's get on. We're talking too much. I want our guest, Bill Ryder, to introduce himself. He is now the executive director of this very important organization. But I'd like to ask Bill to tell us a little bit about his personal journey to where he's got to, and his ties to Manchester, his ties to this whole cause of providing good mental health care for our citizens.
Well, Mike and Bob, it's truly an honor to be here. I was a little nervous. I heard this was the most dangerous hour in television.
Only when he's talking.
And so it's not with a little bit of trepidation that I come, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and spent my first 21 years there. Went to all my college years in Buffalo at a Jesuit school called Canisius College.
Oh, Canisius!
Yeah, and
it's a fine school. And one of my law school roommates was a proud Canisius graduate.
Yeah.
But anyway, go right
So after I graduated from college with a degree in psychology, I was visiting a friend who was going to Franklin Pierce Law Center at the time, which was just about maybe 2 years old, 1 or 2 years old, brand new law school, operating out of
now UNH Law School.
Yeah, operating out of a farmhouse in Concord, and I came to visit, and he had an apartment that was right upstairs from the Barley House in Concord, right across from the State House.
How did he score that?
Yeah, we paid $25 a week rent. This was in 1976, and which was an election year, and there were candidates everywhere. And I was visiting in the fall, and he said, Ryder, he says, why don't you throw in your application at the state hospital, and you could ski, and we could have a good time here in New Hampshire. So I did, and I got a job. I moved here and worked at the state hospital for about 18 months. And then there was a job for.
Was this when the hospital was a big warehouse?
It was very big. There, at the time,
more than 1,000 people.
There were more than 1,000 people, and if you've ever been to the state hospital, the old state hospital, and you pull in off of Pleasant Street, there's a big building with the porch on the front, which is the original building built in 1842, and the unit that I worked on was in that building, and it just happened to be the Manchester unit because Major Wheelock, who was the superintendent at that time, took the hospital and unitized it. In other words, he took all the patients from the Manchester area and put them together, and all the patients from the North Country and put them together, and the people from Keene and put them together. And the reason for that was to prepare for deinstitutionalization, so that the workers in the unit and the people who came to the hospital, they were together, because the plan was they would be moved to the community in the deinstitutionalized effort. And knowing that this was happening, I knew that there were services being developed in the community. And one day there was a clinical case management job in Carroll County, from Carroll County Mental Health, which is a mental health center up there. And I thought, I love to ski. I thought this would be great. I could live and work in Wolfboro and North Conway. So I took a job up there, and it was eye-opening, because I got an assignment to visit a fellow who was discharged from the hospital, and he lived in Center Ossipee, and of course this is 1977, 78, and so I got to Center Ossipee and I had to find his house, and so it was way off on a dirt road, and it turned out that it wasn't a house. It was an old like chicken coop, and so I get there. It's the winter time. There's snow. There's a pathway to his house. There's no car anywhere. He doesn't have a phone. There's smoke coming out of this, stovepipe type chimney. I knock on the door. A guy literally my age opens up the door and lets me in, and he's living in this one-room shanty with a dirt floor, a wood stove, a few provisions, and he just got discharged from the state hospital. And I'm like...
So that was your introduction
to community mental health.
To the deinstitutionalization.
Yeah, he would be an extreme example, but
indeed.
It took place.
It took place.
This isn't a theoretical thing.
No, this happened, and I was quite shocked. So my primary job in that situation is to get this gentleman whose mind is clouded by mental illness, and get him to trust me, and to get him to understand maybe what I could do for him. I didn't know what I could do for him, but I felt that what I needed to do is I needed to get him to where there was some other services and supports, and where he wouldn't be so isolated. I didn't know what I was doing, and so I went to the welfare department, the state welfare department, and there was a guy there. And his name was Charles Lacasse. I'll never forget him. And Charlie, as he went by, was probably 56 years old. And here I am, like 24 years old. And this guy knew everybody in Carroll County. And he knew people who ran group homes, and he knew where the cheap apartments were, and he knew everything. He knew all the benefits. Well, my first job then was to make Charlie my best friend, because he was the best resource I could ever find, because I knew that if I could learn everything Charlie knew, I could help people like the guy that I encountered. Eventually I was able to get that guy up to North Conway, able to get him into an apartment, able to get him, so that he could navigate on his own.
Which was the intention of the deinstitutionalization
exactly.
all along, but I don't expect they planned on the path that gentleman had to take.
It was indeed the intention. I had another fascinating story that happened up in North Conway. There was a woman, she was about 60 years old, and she had bipolar disorder. Well, I found out that that she knew Hannes Schneider, and she was a skier in his ski patrol when he came over to teach skiing in North Conway.
Legendary event.
Yes, and in her youth, when she had her children, she had children along with other prominent women in North Conway, and she was telling me this story and naming these women, and I was quite surprised. So I decided that I would go and make a house call at one of the prominent restaurants in North Conway at the time and ask for this woman. And I told her who I was, and I said, I have permission from my patient. She told me that you were her friend growing up, and I said, could I reach out to you? And she gave me permission, so I did. And, well, it turns out that all of these women responded to one woman connected me to another woman who connected me to another woman. And all these ladies were so thrilled to be able to get reconnected with their friend who had developed bipolar illness at about age 38 or 39. And they didn't really know how to help her. Now she's like age 60. And she was doing pretty well. She had been in the hospital, and she was out now, and she's doing pretty well. And I thought, well, while this woman is well, I want to get her reconnected to her friends. these friends were amazing. And they got her re-included in things that they were doing. And at first, my patient was very nervous about this, but it was like a rebirth for her. And it was really good because, unfortunately, she developed other health problems. She developed, a few years on, she developed cancer and then became sick. But she had her friends then who helped her. And it was so enriching. I learned more about the history of North Conway because these ladies who were in their 60s, they were kids in the 30s, growing up, and they knew all about the development of the ski industry up there. It was absolutely fascinating what I learned.
They lived through it.
But
what both of those stories seem to indicate is that although the goal of deinstitutionalization is a laudable one, and that's a better way to deal with these issues, without some sort of a community net, some sort of an organized way to go about it,
You're absolutely right.
These people end up isolated.
Right.
And it's the isolation feeds right into whatever it is that they're dealing with.
Exactly. You're exactly right. I mean, think about what it would be like if you acquired a spinal cord injury, and after you got out of the hospital, they wheeled you to your apartment or to wherever you were and said, "Good luck, Mike."
To the bottom steps of your second floor apartment, perhaps.
Exactly. You need supports for a period of time to help you become proficient in your environment. And as you become proficient, those supports can taper off. But ultimately, when people end up with a chronic condition of any kind, you need to be able to get the services to help you function at your highest level, your most successful level. You need to get those close by in your environment.
They've got to be available, because if they're too hard to get to, when you're in your distress, you won't go far enough to get to them.
Exactly. And those services being delivered into the community and being done in a way that's inclusive, in other words, you help the individual feel like the store they go to is their store, and the church they go to is their church as much as it is anyone else's. That's a big key, because people who have potentially embarrassing or stigmatizing medical conditions, doesn't have to be mental illness. There are plenty of medical conditions that are stigmatizing and embarrassing for people. They all of a sudden decide they want to avoid, and not because they're afraid they'll be rejected. It's human nature.
Hey, Bob, we're at our 20-minute mark. Time for
Are we already?
Yeah.
Well, folks, this is the way this program goes. It flies by. These stories, I think, are very. We're gonna have a video when we come back, folks, and we always welcome our participation by our viewers. And I know you're out there. You tell me every week you watch this show, and we'd love to have you participate. 640-3091, and we'll be right back, and we'll probably show some of this video that Bill Ryder has brought us about what the Greater Manchester Community Health. All right, we are here for this April 17th. You all done your taxes, right?
Yeah, I got my taxes in about 48 hours early.
I got my extension in.
I know. We talked about it last week. To do an extension, it's crazy. You got to do all the work.
Well, it's not so crazy, because I heard that a lot of the software is not keeping up with the last tax changes. So a lot of professionals are.
Oh no.
Never mind. It's April.
Well, I'm glad you're still legal, Bob. They're not going to come and get you.
They're not going to come and get me.
And
apparently, the whole damn tax thing is a number on the system, because the IRS is so cut back. But we'll do a program on this sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about tax returns. I think we could do a whole show on tax returns.
Oh, yeah, taxes or theft. Never mind. I'm getting crazy here. We are really pleased to have with us Bill Ryder, the director of the Greater Manchester Mental Health Center. And I'm going to ask Bill to, he brought us a video illustrating some of the services they provide. And folks, I bet there's not too many people out there watching our program tonight that don't know somebody in their family or close to them, for friendship or otherwise, that does have mental health issues that are affecting their quality of life. I talk about my good friend John Broderick, who had the problem with his son, has contributed enormously. But we all know somebody. We all know somebody that's faced this problem. And how is the state of New Hampshire coping with this? How are you coping with it? And we have a resource here in Manchester, which Bill has been so important in developing, bringing to us. And it's the value that he provides to the citizens of this state, because we are all connected, can't be understated, can't be overstated, I should say. So, Bill, you want to introduce the video?
So, there's 2 or 3 principal reasons why people don't seek help for health conditions.
Yeah.
Maybe in particular mental health conditions. And one of the top ones is stigma.
I was figuring that was number one.
And people feel that they need to keep it quiet.
It's a moral failing.
Exactly right. And we know that there will come a day where there's a tipping point where it will be as common to talk about as it is getting your knee replaced or
We're quite a ways away from that, aren't we?
I think we still are a bit away. And one of the there's 5 things the Mental Health Center does, which I can elaborate on later, but one of those things is to try to tromp down hard on stigma. And so we approached the John and Mary Elliott Pearl Foundation to support us in developing a video whereby we would interview 4 individuals, and because of the foundation's if you will, focus. It was on folks who are senior citizens, so people 60 and older. And we interviewed 4 people, you'll see in the video, where we interviewed 4 people, and they tell us about how they figured out that they had mental illness, how they told their family that they had a mental illness, because in a lot of situations, they just avoided their family. And there was never any talk about how they were doing. And then they'll talk about their discovery of treatment and how they're doing now. So that's sort of the sequence.
Okay, can we roll
Brendan, why don't you play them in sequence? And
let's see what...
I first realized I had a mental health problem when I became anxious and dejected for no apparent reason.
I first realized that I had a mental health problem when I was 37 and started to act differently than I had before.
Since I've been 4 years old, I have been mentally and emotionally abused, sexually abused, physically abused, all throughout my life.
I first realized I had a mental health issue when my son died, because it was more than just grief. I just had no idea who I was or what I was supposed to do or how I could climb out of the pit.
I first realized I had a mental issue when my first son was born, when I just didn't want to take care of him.
My life changed because of hitting rock bottom, and I realized that this was a serious mental illness that I had.
I think my life changed when my son died, because I found out how strong I was.
My life changed because of my spirituality.
My life changed because I was looking at things differently, and I realized I had to be the one to change it.
My name is Diane.
My name is Frances Newell.
My name is Kitty O'Leary.
Douglas Babcock.
My name's Carol.
I like to read.
I like to sing.
I'm a jack of all trades and master of absolutely nothing.
Well, my passions are theater.
I like building. I build houses for fun as a hobby.
I like to go to church.
I like being around people.
I like flying. I'm a licensed commercial pilot.
I love playing pool.
Photography, water sports, water skiing.
I love animals.
Boating.
I like to create. I make greeting cards.
I've created 6 one-woman shows.
Cars.
My other passion is dancing.
And I love to dance.
Music. I love music.
If I could, I'd live in church.
Bongo drums.
The only thing I can think of that I wouldn't want to try and don't like is cliff climbing and mountain climbing. Anything else I would try.
That's about it.
I just have so much to live for because I love watching my grandchildren and great-grandchildren become real people.
My dream is that the people at Dancing with the Stars will see me as a star of Dangerously High and will invite me to be a contestant on their program. When my family and friends found out about my mental illness, they became fearful of me.
Some of my friends found it hard to believe.
He just blew it off and said, oh, this is just Doug. Doug can handle anything. This is not a problem.
They were all loving and supportive, even though some of them don't quite understand.
They weren't there to give me the support because they didn't figure that I needed any.
At one point, I was in an institute, and my father and mother came to see me, and I did not want them to see me.
My mother, when she found out that I had a mental illness, came to the hospital and said, "What did I do to cause you to be mentally ill?"
I come from a long of hardcore, and I won't name the nationality, but people that just were hard.
And I was manic at the time, so I couldn't explain that parents don't cause it. I hope to get back together with my family, all of them.
Bill, that was quite wonderful.
Yeah, thanks.
And I want to, the thing that, when I was watching these people, the thing that amazed me was their courage.
Yeah.
Their courage to say the things that they said, to acknowledge that they were suffering from mental illness and not feel ashamed or, reticent about it. I mean, it really is very emotional and powerful, and I thank you for bringing that to us.
I think they had to bear the silence and for many years, and I think that they know in their hearts that if they talk about it, other people will talk about it. We teach a program at the Mental Health Center, and it's called Mental Health First Aid. And Mental Health First Aid, think of it as CPR for people who have emotional problems. So I can think when my wife and I, we had 3 kids, and I remember that when we were young parents, we decided that we would get certified in CPR, just in case we ever had our kids or took their friends to the beach or wherever, that we would be able to do CPR. For my wife, it was the second time around. She was a lifeguard. She could do all this stuff, but she convinced me, and so we went and we did CPR. Mental health first aid is CPR for the mind. When we think about this, think about you get to work in the morning and you see your friend and they're getting out of the car and they have a cast on their foot, a boot. They're struggling with a crutch. They're trying to get their papers, and you immediately see that something's happened to them. And you run over and you say, "Can I help you? What happened?" And they go, "Oh, I sprained my ankle and I went to the emergency room and they put this darn boot on and blah blah blah." And you help them get all the way situated into the car. You see somebody get out of the car and you see no physical trouble, but you see their papers flying everywhere, and they slam the car door shut and they don't look themselves. You go, "I think I'm going to give Mike a little space today." And because we were afraid that we don't know what to say, but in actuality, what mental health first aid teaches us is the power of being present with someone else, just being side by side, just being there to get them a cup of coffee, just to be able to say, "I can see it's been a rough weekend. I just want you to know I'm here for you." It's that thing that just they might shove you off for a minute or two, but when you come back and check on them later in the day, "How you doing? I'm here for you." That starts to build the connection, and so this is an 8-hour course, and there's a lot of obviously didactic type information that's related in the course, but it's also an opportunity to just talk among the class participants and the facilitator so that you can understand actually how to deliver it, how to actually have the conversation, how to actually just be present with people. To know that when somebody says, "I feel like killing myself," to be able to just slow down and say, "Well, tell me about that." Mm-hmm. And when they can talk about it, it then starts to make it so that the problem can be get your arms around it, and you can start to figure a way forward. In reality, it's like this for all diseases. I can remember, and you guys do too, because you're old enough. When I was a kid, the dads had heart attacks, and the ambulance came down the street. Some of them didn't come back. Some of them came back and they didn't work again. Nowadays, we know the warning signs. And somebody might start saying, "I've been having the shortness of breath." And we would all say, "Tell me about that. Do you think? What has happened?" We'd ask them a lot of open-ended questions. And then we would encourage them to see their doctor. Take time out for yourself. "Oh, I'm too busy." Well, those things can wait. Maybe you're getting a little calling here to take care of yourself. And we would stick with that because we love that person. If somebody says they feel like killing themselves, we would want to stick with them. Because, this is going to sound probably not right maybe, but in some ways it's like a labor pain. You can get, your brain can be intensely locked on wanting to die, figuring that you're not useful in the world, other people would be better off without you, you've not achieved the things that you thought you would achieve, you would embarrass yourself, whatever it is, and the only way out is through this dark canyon of suicide. If you build in some time and you build in some cushioning, that will start to subside, a more rational mind will come back into play, you'll be able to have a conversation, and you'll be able to find a path forward. So think of it as an angina attack. You have an angina attack, and if you don't heed those attacks, that could be fatal. If you heed those attacks, you get your medicine, you talk to you have somebody there to be with you when you're scared because you're getting these feelings, you'll get through it. So in many ways, mental illness and substance use disorders are like all these other chronic illnesses that we have. And they have an arc to them. And that arc is going to be determined not just by the medical intervention, but by the social supports and the ability for people to get back into and stay in the mainstream.
You know, I've thought about this particular issue of identifying others who might be in crisis actually a lot, and it seems to me we all understand what a head wound is. If we saw someone with a head wound, we would immediately know that there's a crisis. We would immediately take action. I don't think anyone wouldn't. Any decent person wouldn't. But with a mental illness, it's a head wound. You just don't see it. You don't perceive it. The people around you don't identify it for what it really is. Mm-hmm. And I think that was reflected in some of the discussion on this video. They don't understand.
And sometimes,
and also, they don't want to. I don't want to be seen like this.
Exactly.
So there's also active efforts to avoid letting folks know that you're in crisis. You're tough, like the gentleman in the video. He doesn't need any support.
Right.
He can do it himself. He's a tough guy.
Right. And
a lot of people think about themselves that way.
Yeah. I think you're dead spot on about that. They're embarrassed that they feel this way. They're worried you won't understand. You'll think less of them, and so they don't talk about it. Fortunately, in healthcare today, I like to say that there's many reasons. We could have a whole show on how mental and dental were never included in the traditional package of healthcare.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But now we're realizing that it's really the whole body approach and everything has to be integrated. We understand how important oral health is to general physical health.
When I get my physical, my doctor now asks me, okay, we're going to take a minute. How you doing?
Right.
You know,
so they're inquiring.
Absolutely, and it's.
I
don't want to talk about.
My dentist asked me the same question. How's your health?
Which is good. Someone's keeping an eye out.
Yeah. When I go to the dentist now, they take my blood pressure.
Really?
Who would take? That was never a case before.
Not a bad idea.
But it is. They take it as a. And they also, and they do. I'm sure they do an oral health. They do an oral check for cancer. They ask you questions about, are you on the same medicine? Has anything changed for you? They ask you these questions. 20 years ago, when I'd go to the dentist, get in the chair, cleaning, maybe an x-ray, goodbye. And that was it. It was very focused only on the teeth. And now it's much more looking at the whole system. And so, Mike, you're absolutely right. Nowadays, there's screenings done in primary care, and it's so fantastic here in Manchester because Dartmouth and Elliott Health System and CMC have worked with the Mental Health Center to develop care coordination systems so that when they do the little inventory to find out how you're doing, if they discover that you're not in good shape, there are now protocols within their organization to get the patient connected to the mental health center. And in fact, we have a mobile crisis team that's been in place now for 2 years. And we've been to several, not only pediatricians' offices, but adult primary care offices when they have discovered a mom who is like one of the ladies in the video. She discovered that she had mental illness, postpartum depression. Started with postpartum depression.
Yeah. And I think we have a phone number for that mobile crisis team too, Bob. We probably should put that out there.
The mobile crisis team is available 24 hours a day, and when people call that number, they're not going to be talking to an operator. They're actually going to be talking to a mental health clinician. And the team is designed that it can go out and meet people where they're at. It could be in their home. It could be at a neutral spot that they're comfortable with.
That is so critical.
And this is and it was so very cool when we developed this because this you may be aware, Bob, particularly that the state of New Hampshire was sued in 2011. Because it was the suit was an Olmstead Act suit, which is that New Hampshire was being accused of keeping people in institutions, or people were getting reinstitutionalized. They'd come out, they'd get sick, they'd go back because of insufficient community mental health services.
Yeah. A big betrayal of our program when we originally decided to stop the warehousing of people in the New Hampshire Hospital.
The idea was...
And we started off,
Exactly.
my understanding, we started off doing a pretty good job of community-based mental health care, and then we didn't keep it up.
And then there was a long period of what I call disinvestment. And so the state that got sued, it was the Federal Bureau of Justice, and along with the Disability Rights Center here in the state. And in 2014, they reached a settlement agreement. It's called the Community Mental Health Settlement Agreement. And one of the stipulations in that agreement was that 3 mobile crisis teams had to be developed in the state, and 3 communities were identified: Concord, Manchester, and Nashua. And in Manchester, we began developing this in 2016. The first thing that we did is that we reached out to the Manchester Police Department, and we've always had a great relationship with them, and we reached out to them and told them about the opportunity that was coming along, and could we and would they partner with us, and they did. And so we started by bringing in this thing called the Memphis Model of Police Intervention. It's called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training. And it's a standardized practice for police officers to learn how to de-escalate situations with people who have mental illness and substance use disorder, autism. And it goes from the command and control technique that is traditional policing to a more compassionate stance. And the officers go through 40 hours of training, which includes role-playing. And so we brought in an outside facilitator, and we had mental health clinicians that were going to work on the team, and Manchester Police be the first cohort. And now we've repeated it several times to the point now that we have 55 officers trained. They get a pin, it says CIT, so that the officers on the scene know who's been CIT trained. And they provide, and actually we purchase from the city, a police officer to be embedded with our team from 5 o'clock until 11 o'clock every night, 7 days a week. That means that we're able to monitor police dispatch calls, or at least the police officer who's embedded with us can. And we're able to respond to the scene and relieve regular police officers, patrolmen, from that scene, because the CIT-trained police officer and the staff from the mental health center, which is always a peer, somebody with lived experience, and a master's level clinician, take over from there and help the person that's in crisis. It's been absolutely tremendous, and it would be great sometime for the program to get one of the officers from that works on the team, and one of the folks from the team, or even a couple, a clinician and a peer, to be a panel of folks to tell you all about the mobile team. We've been in the first year that we were in operation, the year ending June 30th, 2018, we reduced the number of people that were evaluated at CMC and Elliott combined by 350 patients.
And when did that go into effect? Was the 2018 the first?
2018 was the first full-on year for us. That would have been from July 1st, 2017 through 6/30/2018.
I can think of several people whose lives have been turned upside down that would have benefited tremendously from.
We were only funded, Mike, to see adults. We decided right out of the gate that you can't have an emergency service and say, sorry, you're only 17. We can't come. Yeah. So we do kids. Taking a kid, when a parent or a school sees that a kid is having a problem, the last place you really want to send them is the emergency room.
Right, and I'm thinking of one instance where, at least, and I'm sure there are many more, where it ended up in a fist fight.
Yeah. You can
I don't want to go any further. You probably know what I'm talking about.
I think I may know what you're talking about.
And
you know, you go to the hospital and you get punched in the face. What the heck is going on there?
Yeah, it's a very you know what this community I think really could use, is there are places in the country called crisis behavioral treatment centers, and they are created as an alternative to the emergency room. Every emergency room for the last 50 years has been geared towards speed. Person comes in, you diagnose their problem, you give them life-saving intervention, and then you get them somewhere. So if someone comes in and you think they're having a stroke, you give them life-saving intervention, then you get them to the critical care unit and you take care of their stroke situation. A bad trauma wound, same thing. Heart condition, same thing. But with behavioral health, you need to be at a different speed. Okay, the intervention has to be slowed down because a person's mind is misperceiving the environment. And so you have to make sure that the person feels safe, that the situation is welcoming. And that anything short of a traumatic injury, such as an overdose or a gunshot wound or a bad laceration, you should have medical people in this crisis behavioral treatment center, physician's assistants, physicians, nurses, who can take care of the physical problems, the out-of-control diabetes, the out-of-control asthma, the rashes, all of the physical things that may be even precipitants to the person's inability to feel well psychologically. And then you have the psychological people there who can help the person with their mental health problem. If the person has an addiction problem, to diagnose that, and then help them know that we're not in a hurry. We're not going to throw you out the door. You need to be here for 48 hours. You need to be here for 24 hours. That's fine. We're a bridge. That would be a bridge to your next step in getting healthy. And it would be so cool because you would be able to hire staff who would be totally in that lane, physicians, nurse practitioners. And then the hospitals where you have the heart attacks and the strokes and the gunshot wounds, they would have clinicians who were in that lane, and you would have this level of specialization that would really, really benefit. And if we tied it, and if it was a community effort with our community hospitals here, Catholic Medical Center and Elliott, it would be, and especially in our neighborhood, because we have the biggest population, it would be a great place to launch something like this. It's expensive out of the gate, but when you look around the country and you see some of these models, it's just life-saving for people.
So it looks like we've come a long way from the things you've been doing with the Greater Manchester Mental Health Center. A long way. Where do we need to get to next? What are the big issues that still trouble you today, and we need to get?
I know,
get
Bob,
further
with
ahead.
your background in the legislature, that you're interested in this. We have a lot of things that we're reading about in the paper that have to do with where dollars will be spent by the state for mental health. We have a lot of great people in state government right now, elected officials, including our governor, who are really putting a lot of time on this. The state government commissioned to develop a 10-year plan. I think it was very well done. I think the commissioner, Jeff Myers, and his team did an extremely admirable job of working with Antioch University to get lots and lots of input from people who pay for the services, input from people who provide the services, as well as lots and lots of input from family members and people who have been patients of the services. So that was really good. We have lots of voices come in. I think they developed a very good plan. It's a big plan. It has a broad brush. I think that as the legislature goes to make investment, it should start with the primary investment in the part of the mental health system that treats the most people, and that's the 10 community mental health centers who treat nearly 50,000 people a year. That's where the action is. That's where you'll get your big impact. Essentially, they are the hubs for mental health services. So there needs to be an investment, and the investment starts with workforce, and that starts with changing the rates in which the centers are paid. The Medicaid rates in this state are paid at one of the lowest in the nation. I don't know, we're about 47th or 48th. The thing with Medicaid is, half the dollars don't come from us. Half the dollars, are invested by the federal government, and with Granite Advantage, it's like 90% federal and 10% state. So you can take $10 and make that $100 of service. So we have an opportunity to make big investment in getting the rates right, which will rebuild the workforce, which got diminished because of disinvestment, and then we'll be able to build that community system. At the same time, we need to do the things that the House has recommended, and that is that we need to invest in moving the kids out of the state hospital, using those beds for adults, which will help relieve the boarding in the emergency rooms, providing the community hospitals with some support to develop some more inpatient beds, which will diminish the wait in the emergency room. And then when it comes to the forensic unit, which the governor is absolutely right, we need to have a modern-day forensic hospital. But I think we need to use a process that has been proven to be effective in state government, where a commission requests an engineering plan, requests an operations plan to understand what the cost of that would be, and understand in that operations plan what new developments have happened on a community basis, and both on a criminal justice side and on a mental health center side, that may impact the size of the hospital that you need to build. The last thing in the world we want to have is two situations. One, like we had with the women's prison, where we built it, but because of an inadequate operations plan, it sat empty for a year while we then had to re-scramble to figure out how we were going to staff it. And we certainly don't want to do what we did with YDC, where we remodeled a building. We had 160 beds, brand spanking new, and now we have in there about 25 kids in the juvenile justice system. And now Granite Pathways is operating a drug residential rehabilitation center, which at max will have 36 kids. So right now we're going to fill about 60 beds in there, and we have 100 left over. I don't think we want to do that again.
And that comes from, we talked about this before the show very quickly, we're in our last four minutes or so, but that comes from, because we're in a crisis now due to the lack of infrastructure, that's how we got to the crisis. Right. But if we build out this infrastructure, we really won't be in as bad a shape as it looks right now, so we may not need that much capital investment at the top end.
Exactly.
So we need to, let's look before we leap.
I think you're spot on, Mike, exactly. I just want to tell you quickly a couple of things, because I think the people in Manchester would appreciate knowing this. The Mental Health Center does 5 things. We treat 11,000 people a year. That's a pretty big number. If all those people came together, it would pretty much fill the Verizon Center to capacity. That's kind of a remarkable situation. We also do research at the Mental Health Center. And we've been in research projects with Dartmouth, Columbia University, UCLA, the Feinstein Institute out of New York, Boston University. Some of the evidence-based practices that are now used today and endorsed by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration were actually researched here and developed here in Manchester, New Hampshire. Is that cool or what?
Is.
I mean, it's kind of
a cutting edge.
Yeah, who would have known?
I'm just delighted you do research.
We're in our last 30 seconds. We got to say goodbye because they're going to cut the cameras, Bob. The show's over.
What is Brian back in charge here?
No, it said wrap up. You're not watching the instructions. We blew right through the second
wrap
break.
Wrap up. It didn't say close. Well, I would just like to thank you, Bill, for coming on.
Very glad
we hope we'll have you back here because we could go on about many more topics about this. But I think, we're being very well served by people that you're leading at the Greater Manchester Community Mental Health Center. And I think it's been really terrific to hear you tell us about these things. And I think the stories you brought us in the video were very, very compelling. And I'm really proud to be part of a community where you're providing this invaluable service to some of our most vulnerable citizens because they suffer from mental illness.
And more coming. It seems like we've got some real improvement on the horizon.
Yeah,
too.
we do.
It's been my pleasure, Mike.
It's
Bob.
been
I
really
appreciate it.
fine for you to be here. Thank you so
I
much.
think we'll have to make this a regular feature.
And we'll be back next week, Mike and I. I'm
will.
not sure what I'm going to announce, but we'll be back next week with another edition of the Progress Report. We're still doing it, Mike. Still the most dangerous hour on
It
TV.
rolls on. We're in
It
our
rolls
10th
on.
year, and we're going to keep on going.
I hope folks enjoyed this, and if you didn't catch this, check the replays, because we do have replays, and this is
This
really very informative and pretty uplifting, I thought. Thanks. See you next week, folks.